wesn.
Good morning to you and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you so very much for joining us this morning for this edition of the program. As you are aware, we do things a bit different. Well, we have been doing things a bit different for the final episode of the show for the week. And doing so, we welcome youth commentators to the program. I like to consider myself a youth commentator as well. So I'm joined this morning by Chris Hossain, who once more brings quite a hot topic to speak about. Good morning, Chris. How are you?
Good morning, Keaton. I am very well, actually. You know, it's a Friday. It's the end of the week, the working week. So I think we are very excited for the weekend. And somehow I feel as though this Friday I feel a bit more energetic. You know, we had a holiday in this week as well. So we had enough time to recuperate midweek.
You had enough time to
So I'm excited. But so let's get into the topic.
No, well, we're starting off with the news of the nominations yesterday by incumbent opposition MPs and senators for the United National Congress. Now, bear in mind, it's an interesting mix what's happening within that because of what seems to be an internal dispute as well with the National Executive or points raised by Miaro MP Rushton Parry. But putting that aside for the moment, the bigger topic coming out is the fact that Anil Roberts, Senator Anil Roberts, who is a former Member of Parliament for Dabadi Umera, has filed his nomination papers for the constituency of St. Joseph. Interestingly, it was decided about 2 weeks ago that Gary Griffith would be the candidate for the National Transformation Alliance for St. Joseph. I thought there was an NTA-UNC relationship, partnership, strategic alliance, however you like to call it, happening. What's going on here?
No, that's the best question we must ask. What is going on here? What is interesting is that the UNC, under this current political leader and several deputy political leaders, as a matter of fact, not only the political leader, but in the current national executive of the United National Congress, all of them sang the same song, which was that they won the last local government election. I mean, we had a conversation here, on my opinion, about that. You know, I've been very, very unapologetic that I do not think any seven is greater than the other, right? But there was this justification to suggest that they won, which meant that the accommodation worked according to them. They forgot that last part, but that's how they conveniently, Mrs. Prasad Bisasa and her executive forgot to include that. And so if you said that you won last year, just a couple months ago, with this accommodation with NTA, then that is your secret formula. That should be a secret formula according to you.
Well, a formula at least.
Well, I don't think any seven is bigger than the other. And I think you have a voter turnout of 30.34%. I think in major issues as a political organization that is in opposition. I mean, you have been in opposition for now a decade. You could not inspire more voters to come out and support your plan, your policy. Stand your ground was a conversation very, very timely and strategically, I think, planned for that particular time. Yet the voter turnout did not show the intention. I am sure they intended for a bigger voter turnout. So the formula, NTA-UNC. And now you have the marginal constituency of St. Joseph, that I believe in 2020, the United National Congress under the former candidate for St. Joseph, Mr. Hunt,
Aloy Hunt.
Aloy Hunt would have lost by, I believe, about 700 or 800 votes. Mm-hmm. Not that much. Now you bring another third party into the conversation. I think, you know, the PNM may have the edge here. And the reason I say this is because we have seen it before in 2007 with what occurred with the COP. Mm-hmm. We have also seen it
Well, we saw it most recently in the St. Joseph by-election when Terence Singh first became the Member of Parliament. That is when Ian Allen went up for the United National Congress. This gentleman, this attorney at law, Lalo, he went up, he went up on the part of the ILP, Terence Singh on the part of the PNM. We saw that happening there, and there was obviously a major split as well, because I believe Terence Singh at that time won his seat not just by a couple hundred votes, actually.
What it comes down to is if Mrs. Prasad Bisessa and her executive of the UNC is interested in actually winning an election. Because the UNC knows very well, and I know Mrs. Prasad Bisessa, she knows very well herself, because she has been in this thing for quite some time. She's one of the more seasoned politicians we have. And so she knows, because she too, in 1991, contested against the United National Congress in the seat of Separia. And she lost. I believe she contested under the banner of NAR. So she knows very well what a third force can do in a marginal constituency because of her wealth of knowledge and experience in this politics. So it comes down to if they genuinely want to win.
Well, let's pause that for that's a very good point, because I mean, with all due respect, we can have a debate about the individual Anna Roberts and whether or not he still has that political appeal. In all fairness to him, he still has quite a big following. He does have an online podcast of which people tune into quite often. But an individual with a checkered political history, but we don't have to get into that. Gary Griffith was contacted yesterday for comment about this, and he would have been one of the first persons I wanted to hear from. And according to one newspaper, and I quote directly from Gary Griffith, the candidate is only confirmed on nomination day. So if there becomes some type of strategic alliance similar to what took place in the local government election, it means that 41 out of the 82 candidates that would have been selected by both parties would step down, and we will do what is right for the country. So his first approach seems to be he's holding back. He's holding back. He doesn't seem to be very... Well, he's not letting out a lot of his emotions as you would expect.
Well, Senator Roberts, Arnold Roberts, he has not been declared as the prospective candidate under the United National Congress. Yes, he would have filed his nominations for the seat, but I'm sure there are many other persons who would have filed for that same seat. I don't know anyone else. I don't know. The media have not covered anything. The United National Congress, they have not told us anything. I know they have a very colorful PRO. He has not issued one of his releases to let us know anything that is going on. I assume those may be closed-door discussions and decisions. But he has not been declared. So I think Mr. Griffith is quite correct that you are only declared a candidate on nomination day. And so...
But intriguing again how calm he is. Does that suggest that there is quite possibly some talks happening in the background to try and patch up what at one point seemed like a broken relationship?
This is not the first time that Mr. Griffith and Mrs. Bisessa have fell out before.
Yeah.
It's becoming, again, deja vu, and it's very politically unstable and toxic. And for the opposition party, being led by Mrs. Bisessa, being in opposition for almost a decade, to still be this politically unstable is an issue in this country. And I think with leading the People's Partnership before, learning your lessons from what happened in that government. You would have been the Prime Minister at the time when Mr. Griffiths would have been the Minister of National Security. You would have been the Prime Minister at the time when Mr. Arnold Roberts would have been the Minister of Sport. And so, what are the lessons that you have learned, and how are you applying that to today? And clearly, I don't think she has learned many lessons, because it's not showing in the dispute between her and Mr. Griffith.
Well, sometimes you really wonder who's the actual leaders within the party, or who's the actual political leader of the party. Other news coming out is that UNC Councillor John Michael Alibokas, known as Macmillan, he's filed his nomination papers to contest San Fernando West to try and dethrone Faris Arari. But there's a twist in there as well, because opposition Senator Jayanti Lakshmi Ramdial, she's actually filed nomination papers for both San Fernando West and Naparima.
And well, she said that one of the reasons for San Fernando West would have been not only she's from the area, grew up in the area, practiced her legal practice within the area, but she also spoke to Naparima and executive members reaching out to her, which is important. It is important that members of the party support you in filing your nominations. Mr. John Michael Ali Bokas, well, I guess that this discussion and decision will have to be taken by the screening committee of the United National Congress, which I hope, because that when you, the introduction to today's discussion would have been about the internal disputes. And I know you're alluding to the constitutionally due national executive elections. And I think it would be very unethical for any political organization to screen candidates with an executive that is going to be expired in a month or two.
Well, nomination papers are in. National executive elections can still happen.
Well, the new national executive, when this election happens, because Mrs. Prasad Bisesa has given us, the country, her word, what she has told us was she will hold the elections when they are due. In according to the Constitution, and the Constitution of the UNC is very clear. It says that the election for the national executive will be in June. And so she is saying, basically, there'll be an election in June. And so if that happens, whoever becomes the national executive of the UNC, by the will of the UNC's membership, they can always reopen nominations. That's not an issue.
No, Kamala Prasad Bisesa was due to file nomination papers at 1 p.m. She was not present yesterday. Tried to reach out to her for comments, and various outlets within the media did. They were unsuccessful, but party officials said that an agent filed their nomination papers on her behalf yesterday. So we're not so sure what's going on there, what happened there. It might be something very minor, or it may speak to more issues within the party. Maybe we shouldn't jump the gun until we get more information, because I think the media did reach out to her, no response. No answer. But Rushton Patre did file his nomination papers yesterday as well for mayor. And it seems as though Rushton Patre is very much headstrong and headfast in what he believes in, and that is national executive elections. He says he's not making any more comments in the public domain, nor is he speaking to the media about this. So it seems as though things have settled a bit. Well, internally, it's probably still very raw. Publicly, it seems as though there's some efforts to do some level of public relations and public relations campaigning.
I think when Mr. Parry indicated that, when the media indicated that he's not going to comment on internal elections, I think within a couple hours he clarified his position, which would have been he was very clear. I believe it was a Friday, he made a clarion call for the Constitution of the UNC to be upheld, and by that evening, the political leader of the United National Congress said, yes. She said the election will be called when it's due. And so that conversation or that campaign, there's no need to launch an internal campaign prematurely. There was no need for a slew of releases supporting Mrs. Bisesa. I'm sure you saw all of these releases coming out from the several MPs, several senators within the UNC, and so there, as a logical person looking on, the first time I was on the show, I spoke about Gen Z and millennials and what we wish to see politically, and what are you prepared to do with the space you occupy as a politician. And what I witnessed would have been an amalgamated amount of support for Mrs. Bisesa, when there was no need and was irrelevant because her election did not come up. Her election is quite 2025. The conversation is about the national executive. It has nothing to do with her. So she's not a candidate as yet, so there's no need to throw support behind. I found it to be very premature. And I've also noticed something very interesting happening. There's an aim to sully MP's Parry name. Right now, if you look carefully, and we're not fools in this country, you're seeing strategically there are MPs, sitting MPs, that are using the arms of the United National Congress through their press conferences, through which is supposed to be opposition business. That platform is not for you to parrot propaganda against who you perceive to be your internal political opponent.
Well, I'll tell you what is going to be interesting as well is that at 10 a.m. A press conference is to be held by Dinesh Rambali, and it is in respect to what is happening internally. So I suppose we'll finally get his thoughts and opinions on what's happening there as well. He'll finally speak publicly about this as well, because he's one of the few MPs that have remained quiet on this issue.
I think not only remaining quiet, I think he's one of the few UNC MPs that have been able to put forward a political brand that is attractive, messaging that is attractive, and he has been able to demonstrate to the country in just a couple of years that he's a policymaker. And if you notice, the persons who have been calling for the constitution of the UNC to be upheld are the policymakers in the UNC. You know, MP Parry is big on finance and trade, the economy, energy. MP Haynes Allen, she's big on education and youth development. You also would look at Mr. Rambali, he's big into national security.
Chris, it sounds as though you're already taking a side in this whole thing.
No, you see, because I'm logical. You can't look on as a logical person looking on and see almost madness happen. These are persons calling for a constitution to be upheld. And then you have a group of persons saying, no, we support Kamala. That has nothing to do with the conversation. And then you have persons coming and say, well, no, he and them is P&M. You had an MP, the MP for Princestown, very interesting. I think he said something in a media article. He said that the MP for Tabaquite, MP Anita Haynes Allen, he said that she is basically ungrateful and she was gifted the seat of Tabaquite. Yeah. I mean, are you serious? And first of all, that was a bit of a projection. Who views a seat as a gift? And for you to formulate an argument like that, maybe you yourself view the seat as a gift. And that's a bit of a projection, I think.
We're going to have to shy away from this topic for a bit with respect to internal elections, because there's another topic of which we plan to get into this morning. So we're going to pause there. On the roots in, we're going to get into that conversation. So this term third parties. There's still a conversation over how do new political parties actually separate themselves from those that have existed previously, because oftentimes new political parties are led by old members of old political parties. But we'll get into that debate, that discussion in a bit. We'll be right back.
This is 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
It is, now you don't need to register nothing, we can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Folks, we're back and better than ever.
Your show have always appeared to be a show that is focused on going to the cause or looking to the cause.
We hardly ever talk about the white-collar crime, though. We always talk about the ones that involve more as physical violence against individuals.
The citizens will only measure transmission when water starts to flow through their taps.
The Constitution doesn't talk about local election.
Contract mafia is responsible for looting the country, and they own and operate these politicians.
So if you are running a country and you can't say nothing as a prime minister, please take up your bag and go.
It is not comparative to the murder figures, but it is in fact very high.
I believe he's protecting certain individuals.
Imagine a world where arguments don't exist. CICR is a full-service conflict resolution company that offers mediation training and workshops for all. In 2024, our 40-hour workshops are back, giving you all the tools you need to become a certified mediator in Trinidad and Tobago. Want to know more? Call us at 768-6778 or visit our website. Let's work together to make the world a better place.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Hossain joins me once more this morning on the program as we started the conversation with a topic we didn't necessarily plan yesterday, as we just debated the UNC senators and sitting MPs half-file nomination papers. But we will see what happens when screening takes place and a list of candidates are announced. I think we're still, in political terms, elections are right around the corner. But for us sitting on the ground within the media and on the streets, elections are still a walk away, a good walk away. But anyway, getting into this other topic about third political parties, and it's very intriguing when I take a read at the commentary within the newspapers, when I hear both Gary Griffith and Philip Alexander saying their respective parties or the de facto third party. Winston Dukeran at the launch of the Congress of the People said that it was actually the media who played a role in his party not necessarily gaining as much support as it should have because COP at that time was deemed as a third party. So let me start by asking you, in your opinion, Chris, do you think this term third party in itself could be deemed as derogatory or disrespectful to those parties that are up and coming?
No, I don't think so. I think if you're signing up to be a political organization, a politician, you can't be thin-skinned about what persons say about you. I don't think being a third party is an insult. The reality in this country is we have two major political parties who have stood the test of time. You have the PNM, would have been founded, I believe, 1956. The UNC, I think they celebrated it as 35 years this year, if I'm not mistaken. So you have these organizations, they have established themselves, and they have been the main political organizations in this country. They have, to some extent, both contributed to national development. And so at the third party, I don't see the biggest issue with the name. I don't think they should be so offended.
But then what makes a third party a third party? Is it a differentiation from the United National Congress and PNM, which has dominated our elections for the last, well, I would say 30 years?
Well, here's the thing. Both, as I said, both UNC and PNM have contributed to national development in this country. But they have also contributed to a political culture that is toxic. We can agree on that. And so what persons are looking for right now, and I'll zone in specifically on the Generation Z and millennials, what they are looking for is a political home. We want political stability. We want to have real nation-building conversations. And right now, from both major organizations, what we get is a lot of old talk. We get rhetoric on race, which is a big issue in this country still. I can't believe that in 2024, we are still having a discussion like that. I mean, you saw the last local government election, the campaigns that were run. I mean, you had the United National Congress putting forward a plan of stand your ground, and then Mrs. Pasadli-Sessa saying, load up the Matic, empty the clip. Who is your target voter? Who are you speaking to? You had Dr. Rowley saying, well, stand your ground is basically to give guns to one group of persons to shoot the next. I mean, who are you speaking to in this country? So so I think it can be justified that the 70% that did not vote in the last local government election, no one is speaking to them.
Okay, I hear you. I want to go back to something you just said about the up-and-coming generations, what they're looking for, what they're seeking, what they want. In a most respectful way, are we giving them too much credit? I ask that question in the sense that, do you think they really care who the political party is or who the political leader is, so long as their future is secure? For example, I don't care as long as I get a job. Is that the way of thinking?
Well, that has been what we have been conditioned to believe, and some persons have fell into that trap. But I'd like to think we must never lose hope. I'd like to think there are a big sector in Trinidad and Tobago that want betterment.
But don't want to get involved?
Well, in 2007, the COP would have amounted to over 100,000 votes, and that would have been a third party then. And if we look at the last local government election, that voted in out of 30.34%, I think it's enough to say that persons still, and 70% of this country, did not view the UNC nor the PNM as viable options.
What are the ideologies of third parties within the last 15 years?
But I think they all have changed. They have differences.
Do you think the ideologies really have changed? Because I get the impression that the ideology is still to vote out the PNM. That's the impression I get if I listen to the current third parties that exist. It's to vote out the PNM. Many of them actually speak about forming strategic alliances or partnerships.
There is one third party, I believe it's called the DNA.
Democratic National.
And they, in 2015, they would have tried to vote out the UNC government at that time, and that the political leader would have been Dr. Kirk Meku. So, but you're right, majority of third parties in this country, they have, because the PNM has been in power majority of our what is it, independent time in this country. Yeah, they have been in power. So I think that has always been the goal. But the differences there are major differences. You look at the Congress of the People and the policy positions they held under Winston Dukaran, even under Carolyn Sipasat-Bechan. You look at even Hope. I think Hope, they have been big on policy making and fostering that conversation as to what they wish to see Trinidad and Tobago look like. But then you look at PEP. And I think PEP...
You have to pause for a moment there and process your thoughts as soon as PEP came to mind.
Because then when you look at PEP, what really are you contributing nationally to this conversation beyond Rowley must go and Kamala must go? Well, I saw that the conversation switched. Because for the last maybe 4 years...
The conversation has now switched that the only way to save TNT is a partnership between the UNC and the PEP. Hey, that rhymes actually. Copyright Keaton Shaw 2020.
Yeah. And then you want buy-in, you want to build credibility. I mean, you spent the last 4 years sitting down wherever you sat and going live and playing calypso songs and making a big song and dance about how bad the UNC is and how bad Kamala Prasad-Biswas is, how lazy she is, how bad Anna Roberts is, how bad, all of them, they're so bad, they're so wicked. The PNM, Rowley, everybody, and now you're coming to say, well, I'll support Mrs. Bisa.
Well, it's not only now, because I think it was it in 2019, if I'm not mistaken? I think Philip Alexander declared his intention publicly, and I'm trying to think back as to whether or not he was being sarcastic, but he said he had every intention of actually filing his membership papers within the United National Congress, supporting Kamala Prasad-Biswas and running for a seat under a UNC ticket. This is not the first time that he's really swapped his own thoughts or his own words or his own position.
But didn't he bow out of politics quite recently and he bow back in?
Listen, I don't believe any politician when they say they're bowing out of politics. I don't. They simply cannot leave politics. It's like an addiction.
Well, the thing with PEP, because we spend a lot of time on PEP, and I think when we talk about third parties, I want to speak about real policymakers, not somebody who does lives.
So who's a real policymaker in your opinion?
Who
has proven to be
I think the COP, they have proven to demonstrate. I mean, 2007, even in 2010, the COP has demonstrated that they're big on policy. What has Hope demonstrated so far that they're big on that? Even the TPP in Tobago under Mr. Augustine, they have been very clear. Dr. B. Israel, Mr. Farley Augustine, they have been very clear on some of their issues. Autonomy, the health sector in Tobago, tourism, and so there are clear objectives in terms of what they wish to see in building Tobago.
But Chris, with all due respect, clear objectives and clear goals, or a manifesto in other words, doesn't necessarily mean policy.
Well, that is correct. But I have seen attempts thus far by TPP, because they're still in the building phase of the organization. They have the internal elections. But I have seen clear objectives with consulting with persons which will inform their policy
So then let's go back to the other example that you gave of the COP. Where's the COP been since 2015? Most recently we heard that they signed an alliance with Hope. But where have they been since 2015?
I don't know.
So then does policy makers actually matter? Or is it the style of politics that you bring to the table?
I think it's a mix of both, because even within both the UNC and the PNM, say what you want about the current political leaders, put them aside. There are persons within the organization. I said earlier on, Mrs. Anita Haynes-Allen has demonstrated very, very clear her position, clearly, when it comes to education. Very, very clear. She has been big on critiquing the government's education policy, but not just critiquing it, she has always provided solutions. Similarly, you look on the PNM's bench, and you have seen persons like Dr. Amory Brown, you have seen persons like Penelope Beckles who have been very clear on what their position would have been on issues, and also speaking about policy making, informing policy. We can't go into all the details of it, but even within the UNC and the PNM, there are persons present who, they do it. But I think it comes down to the leaders, the political leaders. Because what we view in this country, I don't think we look at organizations based on all of the team players involved. We just look at the political leaders. When we vote in this country for the past 10 years, the options, it's not necessarily just PNM or UNC, it was really Kamala Rowley.
Okay, so I hear your arguments. And I'm still trying to wiggle my way around it to get a better understanding, because in my opinion, what I've seen with many third parties that have come to the front, and the reason why they're referred to as third parties is because of the first past the post system. That really benefits the two major parties that have existed for the last 30 years, the United National Congress and the PNM. First past the post really benefits these two parties more than anything else. So you might not see that disappearing anytime soon, although you wonder if that will be one of the things constitutional reform addresses. Anyway, moving forward from that, when you take a look at Hope, for example, Hope came out and has spoken very much about wanting to make a difference, wanting to re-engineer our thinking, wanting to reform the state of that is Trinidad and Tobago, wanting to make progress, so all the wonderful things. But then the individuals within the party have all, with all due respect, Louis Lee Singh, for example, Karen Nunes Teixeira, Timothy Hamel-Smith, even Steve Alvarez, who's run under the United National Congress. Nothing is wrong with having supported a party previously and then realizing or deciding to yourself, hold up, this is not what I signed up for, this is not what we believe in, this is not what the party was built upon. We need to try and exit or annex ourselves from this, form a new party. Nothing is wrong with doing that. I'm not against that. But then when you take a look at Hope, for example, the individuals within Hope, do they really have the pull? If they are good policy makers, if they are good debaters, even if they did very good within their time or their tenure for whatever positions, Louis Lee Singh as mayor of Port of Spain, for example, does he still have that pull?
Well, I think the test will be in an election.
You see, that's the thing. I don't know.
You don't know
Chris,
the test will be
Chris,
an election.
I don't. You see, the reason why I say that I don't know if an election is a true test is because people are so brainwashed into thinking that I read and ready till I die, or the United National Congress, we united, we will rise till I die. People are so entrenched in that mindset and way of thinking. And yes, the voter turnout in an election may be below 35%, which is alarming. But none of these parties, even with their good track records, the new parties, the third parties, are able to pull, at least thus far, still new, as you mentioned, but what is their following? What is their building up? Where is their campaign? Where is, we will speak to Hope later on. The entire point is getting, re-energizing, reinvigorating. Could these individuals who are 70 plus years inspire individuals such as yourself, inspire individuals 40 and younger? Remember, youth in TNT is up until the age of 40. Could that happen? So that's why I question, what is exactly the ideology? NTA seems to be a one-man party. You could tell me otherwise. You could argue with me otherwise. NTA seems to be a one-man party. And NTA has not spoken to me about finance, has not spoken to me about the economy, has not spoken to me about anything else but the police service and national security. You pointed out the thing with Philip Edward Alexander and the PEP. It seemed to be a one-man party. When Philip left, what happened to the PEP? He came back. Look at Dr. Denise Soifat Angus in Tobago. She formed her own, the Innovative Democratic Alliance. All right? I've had her on the program many a time. She has very good conversations and she's good at debating. But what is happening there with the IDA and being an opposition? You may not be in the Tobago House of Assembly. That does not mean you cannot be an effective opposition.
Yeah. So I think what we are acknowledging here is that there are some individuals who wish to have a relevant voice or a platform to advocate from. And so they are using the idea of a political party, in quotations, to get themselves on platforms to speak and to have a say. Because I agree, some third parties seem to be a one-man band. Some of them seem to be that. But if you looked just over into Tobago, the PDP, now TPP, would have been considered a third party. And throughout the years, the Tobago electorate, little by little, they started building. It did not happen overnight. When Mr. Duke took the...
Did you just say the TPP could be considered a third party?
The PDP.
Okay.
TPP.
Just yes, thank you.
Yeah, because the PDP would have entered, and they entered the THA. I think there was one seat, if I'm not mistaken. Watson Duke at a point in time got the Roxborough Argyle seat. He was a one-man band at once upon a time. And then little by little they started to build. I believe the next person that would have won a seat would have been Mr. Farley Chavez Augustine, and then they brought in the minority councillor at that time, Dr. Faith B. Israel. So little by little they built, and look what they were able to accomplish. They would have gotten an overwhelming win, historic win of 14-1. So I think it does take some time. And it did show, we look at the voter turnout in Tobago, it did dwindle. So it did show that there was a space for something else to emerge. And so they took that opportunity. It took some time.
So arguably the PDP was one party that has got it correct.
They got it correct.
Do you think those parties that existed in 2010 for the People's Partnership, their campaign, that formed that government, do you think those parties would have stood any chance in an election had they not come together to form a partnership?
No. I think because 2007 showed us what happened. The votes did split. And which brings me back to the seat of St. Joseph, which we discussed earlier on. It's an issue. If the UNC is interested in really winning the next general election, they must have a proper compromising conversation with NTA. And NTA likewise must have a compromising conversation with the UNC.
So let me not misinterpret your argument. Is it that you're saying that in your opinion, the only way the UNC could dethrone the PNM in the next election is if they form an alliance with third parties?
Well, no. Not only an alliance, because there's the possibility of also the UNC utilizing the constitution of its party and rebranding, putting forward a new political product, both the PNM and the UNC. And so it comes down to what the membership is willing to vote for in their internal or their primaries, their internal elections. So, if it is that you have submitted to the country in the past decade this political product, and they have rejected this product, then you have to go back to the drawing board. And I think if the UNC is able to demonstrate to this country that they're willing to give the country a new political product, I'm certain they would get the buy-in that they want.
Okay, I hear you. But then let's flip it around, for example. Let's take a look at the People's National Movement. Arguably, Dr. Keith Rowley, the Honourable Prime Minister, democratically elected, is not necessarily the most favourable. There will be those who support him, there will be those that love him, and there will be simply those that can't stand him. And mind you, that goes for any politician.
Yeah, but
here's
the thing though. Here's the thing with Dr.
Hold
Rowley.
on, I'm just saying, using your example and your arguments about Kamla Prasad-Bissessar, if Dr. Keith Rowley runs in the next election, and again, you can make the same arguments you're making about him as you are with Kamla Prasad-Bissessar. This is the political product that you've given us, and this is what we should expect if you run again. But still, won't you make the argument that the PNM will have a greater chance? Why is that? How is it that it doesn't work for Kamla Prasad-Bissessar in the UNC, but it may work for the PNM?
So, Dr. Rowley became political leader coming off of the historic win for the People's Partnership with that 29-12. And he very quickly, very quickly, he tried to reposition the organization. He was humble enough to know that the electorate rejected what they put forward. And so he knew, in his wisdom, and his team knew, that they had to give the population something else. And so they came up very quickly with that. And that something else worked in 2013. And the election results for local government demonstrated that. The purpose of a political party in Trinidad and Tobago, why do they exist? Why political parties exist, Keaton? The reason they exist is to get its membership, mobilize people, organize policy, have advocate from a space and a position, but all of that to do what? What is all of that for? All of those things are to win elections. That's really what it is, you know. Your political party exists to win. Your political party is not a pressure group, you know. Your political party, if you're sitting down in opposition for 10 years, that is a problem, you know. You are not a pressure group. You are not an NGO. You're a political organization. You must have a policy position on things. You must be able to strategically plan. And if you know you're in opposition, I think common sense will prevail that you must organize and coalesce to all the opposition forces. If you look at what Dr. Rowley did in 2015, he almost went into an alliance with DNA, with Dr. Megu, you know.
Yes.
Almost. So I'm saying, when you're in opposition, the dynamics are different. Now,
sorry to interrupt you, but I've said it on this program before, and I'll repeat myself again this morning. I think the best example of an opposition, what an opposition should be, was when Dr. Keith Rowley led the PNM from 2010 to 2015. I've always said that, and I will remain there. I think he was excellent in opposition, and it showed, as you pointed out.
So now when we look at both UNC and the PNM, Dr. Rowley, has he been able to justify being the political leader of the PNM? The answer to that is yes. And the reason why is because the test of your political leader is it is their ability to win elections. He has proven so far that he has won consistently elections. No. Can Mrs. Bisessa answer the same thing?
I would like to ask a controversial question, and I say it's controversial. You may detest me for this, but I will be the one to ask the hardest of questions, and that is, to what extent was the PNM's success in 2015 and 2020, because I believe the 2015 campaign under the UNC was poor, but we don't have to get into that in particular. But to what extent were there victories because of a weak political leadership within the UNC?
Well, I think the results should tell us what we need to know.
So then, Dr. Rowley may not have necessarily proven himself to be the best candidate for Prime Minister, but he was the lesser of two evils, as they say.
Oh, absolutely. I have been very clear on the difference between your objective as a political leader of an organization and being a Prime Minister, you know. There's a fundamental difference with your ability to govern, and that we will discuss a different day, because Dr. Rowley has been criticized almost every single day, different times in the day, about his policy positions on things, the way he speaks to people, communicate. I mean, that's a whole different show. But if we're talking political parties, which we're talking about third parties and its ability to win elections, well, he has demonstrated that he could win an election. Governance style, that's a different conversation.
So I know we started off the conversation by speaking about third parties, and I actually want to share some information with you, and some historical information, because we went back to 2007 with the Congress of the People, and then we spoke about the People's Partnership all the way up to the local government elections last year. But the thing is that you can tell from the election turnout that a significant part, in fact the majority of the population, does not support the two major parties that have existed. But to go to a historical example about how first past the post as well could impact on third parties, or could impact upon the popular vote, because you use the example of the COP amassing almost 100,000. So many votes they amassed, 100,000 out of a population of 1.3, they didn't get a seat. They didn't get a seat. In 1981, the PNM won the office with 52.6% of the votes cast in 26 seats, that point in time. Right? This is in 1981 we're talking. I'm going as far back as that. The United Labour Front formed the opposition with 8 seats, but the ONR got 22.1% of the votes and got no seats at all. Right? This is then. Another end of the scale, the infamous PNM defeat in 1986 when they got 3 seats. The party still got 31.8% of the votes. They got 31.8%, and they only got 3 seats. The COP in 2007, it got 22.7%.
What was the
of votes.
percentage of the NAR in 86? What
The ONR, sorry, the percentage of the NAR would have been actually close to 60%.
So you see, the voter turnout matters.
No, I agree with you.
The voter turnout matters.
I agree with you, but this is not saying this is a percentage of the population. They're not saying that 31.8% of the population. They're saying 31.8% of the votes. So I don't have the actual information regarding voter turnout on that. But historically speaking, it has declined. It's been a decline. It has not gained any momentum.
Also, the general election, you know, when you looked at the People's Partnership win, they in 2010 they got 69 point something. So let's just say 70% they got in 2010. You come down to 2015 and 2020 general election, it dwindled, you know, from 70, I believe it would have been 50 something to 50 something again. 70 to 50 something is a big jump. That's a big jump. Those are big jumps. So in 2010, what we know is that an increased voter turnout, it does not help the People's National Movement. That's something we have learned. Huh?
Just on a side note, though, at his swearing ceremony in 2020, the Prime Minister hinted that this would have been his last run. Mm-hmm. He hinted that it has not been proven in writing, it's not concrete. Mm-hmm. But thus far, and again, in political terms, elections are right around the corner. For us, still have some time to go. Do you see that, given all that we've been seeing happening, given that we've been told, do you think that Dr. Keith Rowley will run in 2025?
Yeah, ask him if I believe him. As they asking me, yes, if I believe him.
It's a bit of a different question.
Right. Listen, I have seen on political platforms speakers of the PNM endorsing him to be the next Prime Minister.
Well, they have to do that now.
Right, so it's confusing. Maybe he might be confused as well.
I think the best... Should I really make that comment, boy?
Make the comment.
I think the best indication that Keith Rowley is going back up for elections in 2025 is Kamala Persaud-Bissess's staying as opposition leader.
Well, he has proven so far that he is able to win.
Anyway, let's take a break here on AM Prime. When we return, we get into another conversation going back to constitutional reform. Remember, you still have a couple more days to share your thoughts and put forward your recommendations on constitutional reform here in Trinidad and Tobago. But two other parties have put forward their proposals. That is the PEP. We tried to get out to Mr. Alexander, but he's not said no to the interview. He just said not so early. But the other party is Hope, and their political leader will join us shortly. We'll be right back after this.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I am Sierra Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Opposition members filed nomination papers for general elections. 2024 report by the EBC constituency boundaries to be released soon. Internationally, a 67-year-old Vietnamese property developer sentenced to death for fraud. Now for the details. Anil Roberts, an opposition UNC senator, had submitted his nomination papers on Thursday to vie for the St. Joseph seat in the upcoming general elections. When questioned about the relationship between the UNC and the NTA concerning the screening process for a UNC candidate for the St. Joseph seat, Roberts provided his insights.
168 people working and walking are all members of the UNC, and they work hard, continue to work hard, and the team UNC will continue to drive forward to win the election. If the screening committee chooses any member of the UNC to represent St. Joseph, I will support that person as a member of the UNC and anybody across the board and constituencies selected by the screening committee and the leader of the UNC on Team UNC.
Meanwhile, Michelle Benjamin, the member for Parliament for Muruga Tableland, arrived at the UNC's headquarters in Chaguanas alongside Dave Tanku, the MP for Oropouche West, to submit their nomination papers, creating a dramatic entrance. The leader of Government House Business, Camille Robinson-Regis, has confirmed the 2024 report by the Elections and Boundaries Commission regarding the review of constituency boundaries will be presented in the House of Representatives tomorrow. However, Robinson-Regis clarified that the report will only be laid and cannot be debated immediately due to procedural requirements. The report is scheduled to be presented by Deputy House Speaker Esmond Ford, as indicated on the order paper. Robinson-Regis refuted statements attributed to opposition leader Kamla Prasad-Bisasa during the United National Congress Monday meeting in Chaguanas, wherein she criticized the government for not presenting the EBC report, as well as statements made by Robinson-Regis and Faris Olwari on the matter. In international news, a 67-year-old Vietnamese property developer was sentenced to death on Thursday for looting one of the country's largest banks over a period of 11 years. It's a rare verdict. She is one of the very few women in Vietnam to be sentenced to death for a white-collar crime. This decision is a reflection of the dizzying scale of fraud. Truong My Lan was convicted of taking out 44 billion in loans from the Saigon Commercial Bank. The verdict requires her to return 27 billion, a sum prosecutors said may never be recovered. Some believe the death penalty is the court's way of trying to encourage her to return some of the missing billions. Well, that's it to News on the Hour on WESN. I am Sarah Ali. Thank you for watching.
Trinbagonians, you may know me as Blaze. Through my TV and radio shows, you've invited me into your lives. Now, the media's freedom to speak out on behalf of citizens to reveal the facts fearlessly is enshrined in our Constitution. It means we can openly demand accountability for the performance of public officers and authorities. Should your Constitution demand more too? Submit your views to constitutionalreform2024.gov.tt by the 15th of April. It's your future, it's your Constitution, and it's your voice.
Imagine a world where arguments don't exist. CICR is a full-service conflict resolution company that offers mediation training and workshops for all. In 2024, our 40-hour workshops are back, giving you all the tools you need to become a certified mediator in Trinidad and Tobago. Want to know more? Call us at 768-6778 or visit our website. Let's work together to make the world a better place.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Osain joins me this morning for the conversation. We now welcome to the program the political leader of Hope, that is Mr. Timothy Hamelsmith. He joins us virtually. Good morning, sir, and welcome to AM Prime.
Good morning, Keaton, to all your viewers as well.
Well, recommendations for re-engineering our constitution and charting a path for Trinidad and Tobago to achieve its potential. I'm quoting directly from the release from Hope just a couple days ago with respect to constitutional reform. The document actually speaks to 6 points in particular. What is really interesting is that you spoke about corruption and fraud. I'm going to start there. by speaking about Hope wanting to establish, if possible, a serious fraud office under the DPP to tackle corruption and fraud. So going forward in terms of recommendations to amend our constitution for a better TNT, what is Hope's position on dealing with corruption and fraud?
All right, what we're saying here is that a serious fraud office is vital if you're going to go after corruption and fraud. Because what you need is both the forensic investigators and the prosecutor, the prosecuting team, to work together in order to ensure that you have a case that stands up and that you trace the money, you trace the, whatever communication there is, so that your case is solid. And therefore, that's why and this is something that, in any of the successful nations, they will have a serious fraud office, however you term it, but one, unlike what we have right now, where the prosecution and forensic investigators work in close collaboration with each other. And that's the main change here, the game changer, if you like. And what we've said is, this is possible. We're not taking away the DPP's role. Ultimately, the DPP can start prosecutions and can end prosecutions. But we've had special prosecutors before, not on a long-term basis. But if you go back far enough, you will see Mr. Desmond Allen, for instance, was a special prosecutor in the context of a matter which it was felt that it required his particular aptitudes, genius, if you like, in order to ensure that the state was able to hold on to its case. And so this is, I think, a real game changer, bringing in a serious fraud office while retaining the DPP's position, which is why we mention it in relation to the Constitution, because it does have constitution. The DPP is a constitutional entity, and hence the reason for bringing it at this stage. But it is, we believe, a game changer in terms of corruption, in terms of fraud, and finding, tracing that dollar and bringing successful cases that ultimately will mean that, somebody will get both prosecuted and found guilty within the shortest possible time frame.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, Mr. Hamel-Smith, I mean, everyone here in TNT wants a better path when it comes to tackling and dealing with corruption. Make no bones about it. And I understand that this is what Hope sees as necessary for tackling this issue. That being said, though, don't you suppose that the institutions that already exist simply just need more resources, and that the creation of another office or another entity might just be starving such existing entities of resources?
All right. So yes, the DPP does need more resources. They're highly under-resourced. But here we're talking about a different operation, a different type of approach to this matter. Constitutionally, and what happens right now, the police, who are the investigators, and the DPP work in silos, if you like. If the police want to get advice on a certain issue, they may ask for instructions. But that's not what the serious fraud office is about. So it brings in a different dimension to prosecution that doesn't exist right now. So yes, I agree with you. I mean, the DPP's office is, highly unresourced. In this context, we're talking about a special prosecutor who is independent. Independent, not only, I'm not suggesting the DPP is not independent, but has no connection with Trinidad and Tobago society. Mm-hmm. That's one of the prerequisites from our perspective. But also, the resources to engage the services of forensic investigators. Now, that's something we do right now, except that the politicians seem to want to tell the DPP who to go after. And that, that crosses the boundary of what is acceptable. So you're using forensic investigators, and they are specialists in this field, obviously, which we've used in the past, if you recall. Mr. Lindquist is one of those famous forensic investigators that have been used. But here, you're talking about the prosecutor and the investigator working in the same office in collaboration with each other. And that's how, if you look at, New York, for instance, when you see, you always see the prosecutor and the investigator working together. Or London, or Australia, or New Zealand, or Canada, that's the system you operate. And so it's different. It's not just adding another prosecutor. It's a methodology which allows you to actually achieve your objective, which, from all perspectives, we don't see happening here in Trinidad and Tobago right now.
Now, I want to move forward with respect to a couple other recommendations that you've made, and another one with respect to independent offices. You've spoken about the need for the elections of a president. You've also spoken, Hope has spoken about the president's role when it comes to appointing individuals to very important and influential positions within the public domain. This is one of Point's arguments, and this has also been an argument expressed by many within the public domain. The need for an executive president, in other words. But how do we even go about achieving this? I've heard calls for it. How do we go about actually establishing an office that is an executive president?
Okay, so let's just differentiate between the special prosecutor we talked about just now, because that can be done with a simple majority. So there's a political will on whoever is the party in the government to do it. We could do it tomorrow morning. On the other hand, with the president, that does require a special majority. So in the present context of how our parliament is divided up, I mean, it's no way that a single party is going to be able to introduce that. But you would think, I'm not talking about, you mentioned executive president. Yes, there's some executive duties in the proposal made by us. But we don't have, for instance, and I've seen this mentioned by many people, that you have an executive president who assumes all the role, if you like, of the prime minister. But that's not what we are talking about. We're talking about the president, as he or she now stands in that position, have all those roles that they currently have. But what the problem is with how we have set up the presidency is that basically the prime minister gets to choose the president, and then the president gets to choose many offices, which are crucial, independent offices. And so in the perception, in the minds of people, there is a connection between the prime minister, the president, and all of these offices. And that does a great disservice to Trinidad and Tobago. So we're saying, yes, we want an elected president, but we want a president who has some substantive role, functions, not just making appointments, not just seen as a ceremonial president. We recommend that the president head up a fiscal council, which has significant roles. Fiscal councils, by the way, is another institution in all successful countries. You may call it different terms. You have budget responsibility of obligations. You have obligations to make sure you set targets. And it's a role in terms of a fiscal council where you need persons who have an economics background, a financial management background, that kind of role, which means that in our case, we are saying that the people who are candidates for the president will have to have certain qualifications. So I can't jump up because I have no economic background or financial management background. But you have, people, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who fulfill those roles. You can think of a number who are now in the public sphere or public eyes, who are in that sort of role. And that's what you want for a fiscal council member, and more importantly, for the president, who will then have, let's say 5 people go up. We're saying you should have a preferential voting system. So whoever wins needs to have more than 50% of the vote in order to become president. And then because people have voted for the president, and they have no party political affiliation, then you sense that you have more confidence in the president and in all the persons whom the president appoints in various independent operations throughout Trinidad and Tobago. We have, the independent senators, for instance, a very important role. But unfortunately, it's, they're affected by the fact that the president right now is appointed by the prime minister. I mean, for all intents and purposes, despite the fact that you have an election in parliament, the real authority resides with the prime minister.
But Mr. Hammersmith, when you speak about the president being elected, I hear you, and I agree with you. And one of the aims in which, or one of the issues you're trying to curb is really the issue of political affiliation and political speech and that kind of thing, and I get that. But here's the problem that we can run into. We can also run into a problem in this country where political parties put forward their own pick, their own nominees, and maybe go about to endorse it and have their party members, supporters vote for that person. How do we, not run into that issue?
All right. So that is possible. It's possible people, you can't prevent that. So the person might be nominated by a political party or endorsed by, or whatever you want to say. But remember, the candidate has to have certain qualifications. And so what you should have is somebody like the EBC saying, yes, you fill the criteria for being a nominee for the election for president. So that even the political parties themselves will have to find somebody who has that kind of background, experience, competence, qualifications. So you just can't, pull somebody out of a hat. And of course, ultimately, it's the people who decide to vote. And people can, need to vote for who they consider best. So ultimately, you have to have, at the end of the day, you have to have faith and confidence in the people. They elect it, they carry out the election. And what you want to find is that this person, all these nominees, these candidates for president, don't get on the hustings like politicians do right now. The state really should, you should have a debate.
A presidential.
You should allow them to put a one-page ad showing the qualifications of the person, but it has to fall within certain parameters so we don't get into that political gamesmanship. So I'm entitled to see your CV, your resume, and that will be published at the cost of the state. That makes sense. That the state should pay that. You don't want them to say, well, go and get people to fund you, as it were. So for this position of president, we see it being funded by the state with people putting up their candidacy where they have the qualifications. And those aren't, they're not hundreds of people. who fulfill those qualifications, I believe. And that's why we tied the Fiscal Council to the president, more because we're paying the president a salary equivalent to what the prime minister gets. Well, yet it's seen as a ceremonial role.
Mr. Amblesmith, can I just interject you there? Sure. Given time, there are two more points in particular which I want to raise. And the first is, if you can speak more about Hope's position or its recommendations when it comes to term limits. Another issue that has been raised within the public domain during these consultation phases. What is Hope's position on whether or not the Prime Minister should have...
It's the position of everybody. I think, many people have put forward. There should be term limits. It should be limited to two terms, a maximum of 10 years for the Prime Minister.
But do you think that is sufficient for an individual or a party? Such as Hope, for example. Let's just say Hope wins an election next year. Do you think 10 years is enough for Hope to really make the difference and clean up the mess that TNT has experienced over the last how many years? Do you think that's enough?
In 10 years, you ought to have, 5 years can be a little short. In 10 years, if you haven't gained a foothold on what you propose to do, then in fact, not just that you should have a maximum of 2 terms, then you haven't achieved what you set out to achieve. It's time to give, Hope is still there. Hope can have a new person going up, and we have many executives who are capable of being Prime Minister, as it were. And therefore, I have no problem from a Hope perspective, after 2 terms, after 10 years, in having somebody new come forward.
No, I agree. I agree with you, Mr. Timothy Hamilton, because it is not about the party being in office for 15 years, It is about who is leading the political organization or the Prime Minister. So I agree that what we're speaking about specifically is the term limits of the Prime Minister, not the term limits of the political organization. And I think what it will assist in, because this whole conversation of constitutional reform is our opportunity as citizens to amend, get it right, fix things that we...
and I do hope the public has participated.
And I agree. And
it can be done with a simple majority, by the way. So tomorrow morning you could have that, if we really had the political will to achieve.
And we want to encourage the population to get out there and use your voice and add to the conversation. But term limits for Prime Minister not only will assist in accountability and transparency, stem corruption. I mean, you are seeing current office holders right now, not just Prime Ministers, politicians who occupy an office, and they're taking the space in the office which they occupy for granted. Just even the office of being a member of parliament, as simple as being an MP. And so I think term limits for Prime Minister...
No, Chris, with all due respect to 5, 10, 15 years, it doesn't matter. You get a lot of corruption could take place within 5 years.
And so I hope you all have a proposal for that as well. But this is really for us as a population now to reflect on the Constitution and say, you know what, over the past years we have witnessed issues of corruption. How do we stem it? We have witnessed issues of Prime Ministers becoming complacent and a bit hungry for power and wish to occupy the space, even though they have not been really contributing much to national development. And so this is our opportunity as a population to say, let us fix this.
Mr. Amblesmith, there's 6 points, 6 major points, 18 recommendations in total on the part of Hope. But this is something that is quite important that I have not seen Hope commented on. I don't know if at this time you can speak to whether or not Hope has a position on campaign finance reform.
All right, I mean, I took that for granted. Sorry, perhaps campaign finance reform is not a constitutional issue, but absolutely we favor party financing legislation. There is a bill right now before Joint Select Committee. The bill was modeled on what came out of Jamaica. It's something I have recommended personally in terms of if you wanted to look for a model. They have some tweaks that need to be fixed. I don't know if perhaps it went under the radar as well. But one surprising proposal in that bill is that you cannot be a party with a regional, only a regional focus, which would, when you think of Tobago, that would throw them out the window. How could, you know, and I say this because I think we need to bring it to the attention of the people of Tobago that, you know, if your political party only has seats in Tobago, you might be excluded from running an election as a political party, and you will have to put up independents. And that is, I can only believe that that is an oversight and not deliberate, because if it were deliberate, that would be, you know, extremely, you know, demotivating for the people of Tobago.
Indeed. Mr. Amos-Smith, we're going to have to actually pause it there. I mean, half an hour doesn't do us justice with the amount that we have to get into in terms of the document itself. But those are just some of the major points that we were able to touch on this morning. So thank you very much for taking...
I'd like to endorse what Mr. Hossain said about the Prime Minister role of term limits. You know, that's not a Trinidad thing, but hubris does come in after 10 years. So if you didn't want to look at locally, I remember, you know, Tony Blair, one of the people for whom I had great admiration. Once he passed 10 years, that third term was an absolute failure. That's when you had the war that he endorsed.
Yeah.
You know, weapons of mass destruction. So I just put that before you in support of term limits.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amos-Smith. Indeed. Thanks so much for your time this morning. Have a good day.
Good. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you again, Ethan, and my friend Mr. Hossain.
Thanks a lot.
Likewise.
Right.
Thank you.
Tony Blair is one example of probably stretching a bit too much. It's a good example.
No, it's a good example. I think Franklin Roosevelt is another great example as well.
I think he's the only president to actually serve 3 terms. Then we have right around the corner from TNT, you've got Mia Motley, who's decided that that's it, 10 years, and I'm done. This is her last time as Prime Minister.
As you should, because the office of the Prime Minister is not for you to vacation in and end off your retirement there. This is a space in which you lead your cabinet, and you must have had something, and you got a succession plan in. You got to prepare your political organization. Forget Prime Minister for it. Your party. You must be.
Well, this is
ensuring that someone could succeed you.
This is the thing for me. I am all in support of term limits. On I think it was the second week we had that conversation. I support term limits, very much so.
What does it take on age limits?
On age limits?
Age limits.
I'm a bit conflicted, I won't lie to you, because I think experience could mix well with youth. Now, if you take a look in Ghana, you have a fairly young president in Ghana, although the argument is it's the vice president who's really leading the charge, the vice president who's really running the affairs of Ghana. But, Dr. Muhammad Irfan Ali is the face of the office and the leader by election. I think youth and experience is a good thing.
I think it's a good thing, but when I look at, there must be a minimum and a maximum. So if the minimum age for the lower house is 18, I think we may need to look at a maximum. If the minimum age for the Senate is 25, which I don't agree with, I think that too we need to revisit. Because I know a number of persons my age and younger, I'm not 25 years as yet, but my age and younger, who are willing to contribute to national policy. I can name a number of persons. As a matter of fact, let me take this opportunity to congratulate the Trinidad Youth Council. They would have held their elections, and there's a new executive, so I want to congratulate them. And of course also the Student Guild of the UE.
Yes, yesterday was the election.
Yeah, and I want to congratulate them. And these young persons have a conversation, a meaningful conversation to add to national development in this country. So when we speak about the age limit of a senator being 25 years and older, I think we need to look at that a bit more as well.
I like that way of thinking. There's a minimum age for everything. People don't know when to stop. People don't know when to stop. I personally think that from the time they see people turning 70, they've been in politics so long. When at the age of 70, that's.
But but there comes a time where we too, as citizens in this country, we have to say thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Because, you see, when you're creating legislation and you're thinking about developing this country, I want my legislators to think at different generations. Their own, the generation that is to come, and even the generation before them. You know? Because if you're creating discussions, policy, legislation, for the next 20, 30, 50 years, I want that you have an intention to be also here to understand the ramifications or the successes of that. I think that's important as well.
Well, in the words of Chris Hossain, thank you for your service this morning, Chris. Thanks very much for joining us on the program. I think we're going to have to pause it there, but next week, Friday, Chris joins us again on AM Prime as we continue our debates and conversations heading into the election 2025. Chris, have a good weekend.
Have a great weekend as well.
May it be not too exciting. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Keaton Shaw. This has been AM Prime on WESN. We'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Fellow citizens, I am Rajiv Dipti. In my business, I meet people from all walks of life. I hear their stories, from struggles to successes. The supreme law of our country that safeguards our individual rights and freedoms as we go about our daily lives is the Constitution. It was amended back in 1976, but life is different now. The Constitution can be altered through legislative reforms. So please submit your recommendations to constitutionalreform2024.gov.tt by the 15th of April. It's your future, your Constitution, your voice.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
Folks, we're back and better than ever.
Your show have always appeared to be a show that is focused on going to the cause or looking to the cause.
We hardly ever talk about the white-collar crime, though. We always talk about the ones that involve more physical violence against individuals.
The citizens will only measure transmission when water starts to flow through their taps.
The Constitution doesn't talk about local election.
Contract mafia that's responsible for looting the country, and they own and operate these politicians.
So if you are running a country and you can't say nothing as a prime minister, please take up your bag and go.
It is not comparative to the murder figures, but it is in fact very high.
I believe he's protecting certain individuals.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website, www.fanzonett.com.